It was supposed to be just another quiet evening. The soft hum of the dishwasher filled the Carter household as Monica finished wiping the kitchen counter. In the dimly lit living room, Ethan Miller sat, pretending to focus on a college application spread across his lap, but his mind was somewhere else, trapped by a secret he could no longer ignore. Through the half-open door, he caught a glimpse of Monica. Her smile was different tonight, softer, more dangerous. Then a whisper, not meant for his ears. Ryan's voice, close and casual, laced with something Ethan had never heard before. A chuckle, a hand brushing a shoulder, and just like that, Ethan's world tilted. How do you process watching your best friend and the woman you respected most blur lines that should never have been crossed? The night grew colder, even inside the warm house. A family dinner that once felt comforting now buzzed with invisible tension, every laugh sharper, every glance heavier. One mistake, one betrayal, the kind that doesn't just ruin friendships, it destroys lives. And as Ethan clenched his fists under the table, one haunting question echoed louder than everything else. How long had this been going on right under my nose? Before we dive deeper, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Each week we reveal chilling true crime stories you won't find anywhere else. Join our community of truth seekers, because sometimes knowing the hidden story can change everything. Don't miss the next secret. Ethan Miller had always been the kind of guy everyone trusted without thinking twice. Growing up in the suburbs of Franklin, Indiana, he wasn't flashy or loud. He was the steady hand, the quiet support, the friend you could call at 3 a.m. without fear of judgment. Raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse, Ethan learned early the value of loyalty, humility, and hard work. He didn't have the newest sneakers or the flashiest gadgets, but he carried himself with a quiet dignity that made people feel safe around him. From middle school onwards, Ryan Carter became his closest friend. They met during a science fair of all things, bonding over a failed experiment and a shared love for classic rock music. Since that day, they were inseparable. Sleepovers, family vacations, Sunday barbecues. Ethan was practically part of the Carter family. And Monica Carter, Ryan's mother, was a big part of why he felt so at home. Monica treated Ethan like he was her own. She'd patch up his scraped knees, remember his favorite meals, and even slip him $20 sometimes when he forgot his wallet at the movies. She wasn't just Ryan's mom. To Ethan, she was a symbol of everything a family could be: warm, stable, nurturing. But Ethan wasn't without his struggles. Despite his kind nature, he battled with an overwhelming fear of abandonment. Being left behind by his own father at age 6 had left a scar he rarely spoke about. That deep, aching need for belonging made him hold on to people tighter than he probably should have. It made betrayals feel like the end of the world. He wasn't perfect either. He had his doubts, his insecurities. There were nights he stared at the ceiling, wondering if he was just a burden to those around him. There were times he questioned whether he truly deserved the good things he had. His dream was simple but powerful: stability. To graduate, land a steady job, maybe buy a small house one day where he could finally feel at peace. He didn't chase fame or wealth. He just wanted to be part of something that lasted. Monica and Ryan were central to that dream. Their home felt like a second chance at the childhood he missed. In many ways, he looked up to Monica not just as a maternal figure, but almost like a beacon, proof that people could be kind and that families could survive the hardships of life. That's why, when the betrayal began to unfold, it didn't just hurt Ethan, it shattered the fragile structure he had built inside himself. The belief that loyalty and love were enough to keep people together. He wasn't just losing a friend. He was losing a second mother, a second home, and maybe a part of himself he would never get back. The night Ethan first caught the glances, the hidden smiles, he didn't know it yet, but his world had already started to crumble. For as long as Ethan could remember, he had one goal in mind: stability. Not money, not fame. Just a safe, warm life where the ground didn't shift under his feet every few months. Growing up in a home where the fridge was often empty and eviction notices decorated the front door, Ethan craved predictability the way other kids craved candy. He didn't need luxury, he needed consistency. He dreamed of a small two-bedroom house with a golden retriever in the yard and someone waiting for him at the door when he got home. Simple dreams. But to Ethan, they were everything. School was his escape. While others dreaded homework, Ethan embraced it. Each grade passed was another brick laid in the foundation of the life he was building for himself. He stayed out of trouble, avoided risky crowds, and clung tightly to the few people he could trust. Ryan Carter had been one of those people. Ryan was the golden boy, charming, funny, seemingly invincible. Their friendship felt like a life raft. Through Ryan, Ethan gained a sense of normalcy he had never known before. Birthday parties that didn't end in arguments. Family dinners where no one threw plates. It was addicting, the illusion of a life he thought he could never have. Monica Carter played a pivotal role in that fantasy. She treated Ethan like family without question. She laughed at his jokes, encouraged his dreams, and made a place for him at every table, every celebration. In many ways, Ethan began to see the Carters as an extension of himself, as if loving them and being loved by them would somehow fill the missing pieces inside him. In high school, when everyone else was partying and sneaking out at night, Ethan worked. He bagged groceries, mowed lawns, tutored underclassmen, anything to save up for a future he could believe in. He kept a notebook filled with goals. Graduate with honors, get a stable job, never have to sleep in a car again. Every dollar saved was a step closer to freedom. Every A on a test was a slap in the face of the life he had been born into. Still, there was fear beneath his ambition, a gnawing, quiet voice that whispered, what if it's not enough? What if he fought and climbed and clawed his way out, only to have the world pull him back down again? He didn't voice these fears to anyone, not even Ryan, especially not Ryan, because deep down, Ethan worried that if he admitted how much he depended on them, on the Carters, he would somehow lose them, that they'd see his desperation and recoil. By the time senior year rolled around, Ethan had it all mapped out. He and Ryan would go to community college together, maybe even get an apartment one day. He could stay close to the Carters, keep the only semblance of family he had ever known intact. He imagined holiday dinners where he wasn't just a guest, but truly belonged. He pictured a future where Monica's warm smile was a permanent fixture in his life, not just an occasional blessing. The Carters weren't just part of his life plan. They were the life plan. The thought of anything threatening that dream was unbearable. That's why he was so blind to the early warning signs. The way Monica sometimes lingered a little too long when hugging Ryan. The private conversations that ended abruptly when Ethan entered the room. The almost imperceptible shift in the energy between them. He chalked it up to stress, to overthinking. He told himself families were complicated. People grew distant. He ignored the unease curling in his stomach, the whispers of intuition begging him to look closer, because if he looked too closely, he might see something he couldn't unsee. And if the Carters fell apart, Ethan feared he would fall apart right along with them. So he clung tighter, smiled wider, worked harder, did everything he could to be useful, invisible, indispensable. Maybe if he stayed good enough, if he stayed close enough, nothing would change, maybe. But late at night, when the house was quiet and Ethan lay staring at the ceiling, a single terrifying thought echoed in his mind. What if the life I'm building is already starting to crack, and I just can't see it yet? It started with little things. Small, almost invisible at first. A glance that lingered just a second too long. A laugh that seemed just a bit too intimate. Moments that, if anyone else had seen them, would have been dismissed as innocent. But Ethan wasn't just anyone. He had grown up reading people's moods like survival instincts, and now something in the Carter house was shifting. One night after dinner, Ethan caught Ryan and Monica exchanging a look he couldn't explain. It wasn't motherly concern or playful teasing. It was something heavier, something electric, and for the first time, Ethan felt like an outsider in a home that had once felt like his own. The changes were subtle but relentless. Monica started dressing differently around the house. Nothing obvious, just more carefully. Ryan, once casual and dismissive, grew oddly possessive of his mother's attention. He would cut Ethan off mid-sentence to ask Monica unnecessary questions, needing her focus like a drowning man needs air. Ethan's gut twisted every time, but he told himself it was just the stress of senior year, the weight of upcoming goodbyes. Maybe they were just clinging to each other. Maybe he was imagining it all. But the signs piled up. One afternoon, Ethan came over earlier than expected. He walked through the unlocked front door and froze. Ryan and Monica stood in the kitchen, far too close, whispering urgently. When they noticed Ethan, they sprang apart like guilty teenagers caught sneaking out. "Oh, hey, buddy," Ryan said, voice cracking with forced cheer. Monica's smile was too wide, her hands trembling slightly as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Ethan laughed it off. He made a joke about sneaking up on them, but inside, ice spread through his chest. Later that night, he couldn't sleep. He lay awake, piecing together every odd moment, every uncomfortable glance. He thought about the missed phone calls, the sudden cancellations, the way Monica had started avoiding being alone in a room with him. It didn't add up. A few days later, Ethan found the final piece. Ryan had left his phone unattended in the living room. Ethan wasn't the type to snoop, but something pulled him toward it, an invisible force he couldn't resist. The phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Monica. "Miss you already. Can't stop thinking about last night." Ethan's stomach dropped. He sat there, stunned, the words blurring in front of his eyes. His world shifted again, more violently this time. The Carters, his safe place, his second family, had been hiding something unspeakable, and now he knew. The betrayal wasn't some vague feeling anymore. It was real, tangible, undeniable. He put the phone back exactly where he found it, his hands shaking, his mouth dry. He didn't confront Ryan. He didn't confront Monica. Instead, he left. He mumbled something about homework and stumbled into the night air, his chest heaving like he had just run a marathon. The cold slapped his face, but it didn't wake him from the nightmare. He wandered aimlessly through the streets of Franklin, numb. How long had this been going on? Had they laughed about it behind his back? Had he ever truly been part of their family, or was he just some pathetic kid they pitied? Questions with no answers circled his mind like vultures. At some point, Ethan found himself sitting alone on a swing set at the old elementary school. He stared up at the stars, the same stars he used to wish upon as a little boy. Let me belong somewhere. Let me matter to someone. He had gotten his wish once. Now it felt like a cruel joke. The life he was building, the life he was sacrificing for, had rotted from the inside without him even noticing. His dreams of a stable future, a second family, a place he could call home, all of it was based on a lie. Ethan realized, with a hollow ache in his chest, that he hadn't just lost Monica and Ryan. He had lost the person he was when he believed in them. And somewhere deep inside, another darker thought took root. If they could betray him so easily, maybe he had been a fool to believe in anyone at all. Ethan knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. The evidence wasn't circumstantial, it was in black and white, glowing from Ryan's phone. The betrayal was alive, breathing, and far worse than anything he had ever imagined. But confronting them wasn't easy. For days, he rehearsed conversations in his head. He imagined bursting into the Carter home, demanding answers, watching their faces crumble in guilt. He fantasized about Monica begging for forgiveness, about Ryan realizing the magnitude of what he had done. But reality never matched his daydreams. Instead, he waited. He watched. He needed the perfect moment, one where they couldn't lie, couldn't pretend, couldn't run. It came one Friday night. Ryan had invited a small group of friends over for a movie marathon. The Carters' living room buzzed with laughter, the smell of buttered popcorn thick in the air. Monica floated around the house, acting the perfect hostess, offering sodas and extra blankets. To anyone else, it looked normal, happy, safe. But Ethan knew better now. He could see the way Monica's gaze lingered just a heartbeat too long on Ryan when she thought no one was looking. He could hear the extra warmth in her laugh when Ryan cracked a joke. It wasn't motherly. It wasn't innocent. It was wrong. And Ethan felt it like a stone in his gut. Around midnight, when most of the friends had either fallen asleep or left, Ryan pulled Monica aside under the pretense of helping her clean up. Ethan stayed back, pretending to scroll on his phone, but every nerve in his body was tuned to them. He waited 5 minutes, then 10. When the house grew quieter, Ethan slipped down the hallway, moving like a ghost. The kitchen light was on, casting long shadows across the floor. He could hear whispers, low, urgent, intimate. He edged closer, his heart pounding so loudly he thought they might hear it. And then he saw them. Ryan stood behind Monica, his arms wrapped around her waist, his lips brushing against her ear. She leaned back into him, her head tilting, her eyes closing. It wasn't a hug, it wasn't comfort. It was something no son should ever share with his mother, and something no friend should ever have to witness. Ethan stood frozen, the world around him collapsing in on itself. He wanted to scream, to punch something, to run, but he couldn't move, he couldn't breathe. He watched, paralyzed, as Monica turned in Ryan's arms and kissed him, slowly, deeply, like lovers. It was a kiss Ethan could never unsee. He stumbled backward, his foot knocking into a loose floorboard. The sound was deafening in the silence. Monica and Ryan jerked apart, eyes wide with horror. "Ethan!" Monica gasped, her face draining of color. Ryan stepped forward instinctively, hands raised as if to explain, to beg for understanding. But there were no words that could fix this. Ethan felt bile rise in his throat. He shook his head, backing away, the walls closing in. "I trusted you," he choked out, his voice breaking. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them tried to stop him. They just stood there, guilty, broken, as Ethan turned and fled from the house that had once been his sanctuary. He ran until his lungs burned, until the cold night air tore at his skin. He ran past the park, where he and Ryan had played as kids, past the diner where Monica had bought him his first slice of birthday cake. Every memory now felt poisoned. When he finally stopped, he found himself standing in front of his own crumbling apartment building, the place he had tried so hard to escape. The irony hit him like a slap. He had built his entire dream around a lie. And now he had nothing left. The next few days were a blur. Ethan skipped school, ignored texts and calls, locked himself in his room, replaying the scene over and over in his mind until he thought he would lose it. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, he just shut down. He became a hollow version of himself, going through the motions, pretending everything was fine when inside he was unraveling. Monica tried to call once. He saw her name flash across the screen, his thumb hovering over the decline button. For a second, he considered answering, demanding answers, screaming until she understood what she had destroyed. But what was the point? Nothing she said could fix this. Nothing could unbreak what they had shattered. And so, Ethan let the call go to voicemail. Then he blocked her number. Ryan never called. Maybe he was too ashamed. Maybe he thought silence was easier. Either way, Ethan got the message loud and clear. He was alone. Utterly, completely alone. The humiliation wasn't just private. It was public. At school, whispers followed him down the hallways. He could feel the stares, hear the half-finished sentences. Someone had seen him running from the Carter's house that night. Someone had put two and two together. Franklin was a small town. Secrets didn't stay secret for long. And Ethan, once invisible, was now the center of a scandal he hadn't created, but couldn't escape. The betrayal wasn't just between him, Monica, and Ryan anymore. It was everywhere, in every smirk, every side glance. Every time he walked into a room, he felt like the punchline of a cruel joke he didn't understand. The walls closed in tighter, the air grew thinner, and the anger, the hurt, the devastation inside him began to curdle into something darker, something dangerous, something that would soon find a way out. The days after Ethan's discovery were suffocating. Everywhere he went, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the world. At school, conversations would grind to a halt when he walked past. People stared just a little too long, whispered just a little too loudly. He had become a ghost in his own life, an unwanted character in a story he never asked to be part of. The Carter family, once seen as the town's golden standard, now carried a stain no one could ignore. The rumors twisted the truth, warped it into grotesque shapes, but none of them hurt as much as the real thing Ethan had witnessed. He didn't need exaggerations or gossip to understand the depth of betrayal. He had seen it with his own eyes. And Monica, she disappeared. After that night, Monica Carter all but vanished from public view. She stopped attending PTA meetings, stopped showing up at church. Neighbors whispered that she had taken a leave of absence from her job at the local clinic. Her house, once a hub of activity and laughter, now sat eerily silent, blinds drawn, lawn untended. Ryan, too, seemed to retreat into himself. Ethan saw him once, across the school courtyard. Their eyes met for a split second. Ryan looked away first. There was no apology in his gaze, no guilt, only fear. That brief exchange told Ethan everything he needed to know. There would be no reckoning, no closure, no justice. They would move on, or try to, while Ethan was left to pick up the shards of a life that had shattered without warning. Home wasn't a refuge anymore either. His mother, already stretched thin by endless work shifts, noticed his withdrawal, but mistook it for typical teenage angst. She didn't have time to dig deeper. She didn't see the warning signs, the sleepless nights, the untouched meals, the hollow stare Ethan wore like a second skin. In his bedroom, Ethan surrounded himself with memories he no longer trusted. The old friendship bracelets he and Ryan had made one summer, photos from birthday parties at the Carter's house, little notes from Monica praising him for small accomplishments. Every object was a dagger now, every memory a fresh wound. He boxed them up one night, tossing them into the back of his closet like he could bury the betrayal along with the evidence. But the pain refused to stay hidden. The isolation gnawed at him. His grades slipped. He skipped classes. He started taking long walks at night, wandering aimlessly through the town's empty streets until the sun threatened to rise. He barely spoke anymore. When he did, his voice sounded foreign to him, thin, brittle, like it might crack under its own weight. He wasn't angry, not at first. He was broken, but over time, something inside him began to change. The sorrow hardened, the shame calcified, the betrayal twisted into a slow, simmering rage that pulsed just beneath his skin. How dare they? How dare they destroy everything he had built without a second thought? They had taken his hope, his faith in people, and crushed it under their selfishness. And worst of all, they didn't even seem sorry. The injustice of it burned hotter each day. Every smile he saw, every happy family walking past him on the street felt like a personal attack. Why did they get to be happy when his world had been reduced to ashes? The anger grew roots. It fed on every whispered rumor, every pitying glance, every smirk from classmates who thought they knew the whole story. It whispered to him at night when the house was silent, "You don't have to take this. You can make them understand what they did to you." At first, Ethan pushed the thoughts away. He wasn't violent, he wasn't dangerous. He was a good kid, wasn't he? But the voice kept coming back, persistent, patient. One particularly cold night, Ethan found himself sitting on the swings at the abandoned elementary school again. The same place he had fled to after seeing Ryan and Monica together. The chains creaked under his weight as he rocked back and forth, staring at the dark sky. He thought about how small Franklin was, how everyone's lives intertwined in messy, unavoidable ways. He thought about Ryan, laughing with friends, as if nothing had happened. He thought about Monica, hiding behind closed doors, too cowardly to face the consequences of her actions. And he thought about himself, forgotten, humiliated, discarded. The anger crystallized into something solid that night. A plan. It wasn't fully formed yet. It was more like a shadow, a whisper of an idea, but it felt right in a way nothing else had for weeks. He wouldn't be the victim anymore. He wouldn't let them rewrite the story, painting themselves as innocents while he bore the weight of their sins. If the world refused to punish them, then maybe, just maybe, he would have to do it himself. And as the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, dusting the abandoned playground in white, Ethan made a silent vow he would not be forgotten. They would remember him, one way or another. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, take a moment to like this video and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Every story of survival strengthens this community and reminds us we're never truly alone, even in our darkest moments. In the weeks that followed, Ethan's anger transformed into a quiet, burning resolve. He still walked the halls of Franklin High, invisible yet hypersensitive to every look, every whisper. He went through the motions, finishing classes, pretending to care, while inside a storm was brewing. He needed a way to even the score, but for that, he needed more than just resentment. He needed proof, something undeniable, something he could weaponize. One chilly Thursday afternoon, opportunity knocked. Ethan was walking home when he saw Monica's car parked outside the old community center. It was unusual. The building had been mostly abandoned for months, undergoing delayed renovations that never seemed to happen. Curiosity, or maybe instinct, pulled Ethan closer. He ducked behind a row of overgrown bushes, his breath misting in the cold air as he watched. A few minutes later, Ryan appeared, jogging across the street and slipping inside the building without knocking. Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't some casual meet-up. Not here. Not like this. He moved quietly around the side of the building, looking for a vantage point. Most of the windows were boarded up, but near the back, he found a crack wide enough to peer through. What he saw erased any lingering doubts. Inside, under the flickering glow of a single bulb, Monica and Ryan stood locked in an embrace. They weren't mother and son in that moment. They were conspirators in something far more sordid. Monica reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. Ryan opened it, thumbing through what looked unmistakably like stacks of cash. Ethan's blood ran cold. It wasn't just a secret relationship, it was something bigger, something darker. He leaned closer, trying to hear through the crack in the glass. "Keep it quiet," Monica hissed. "No one can find out, especially Ethan." Ryan nodded grimly, shoving the envelope into his backpack. Ethan stumbled back, barely keeping himself from crying out. What the hell was going on? He waited until they left, Monica first, then Ryan a few minutes later, each going in different directions. Once the coast was clear, Ethan slipped inside. The community center smelled of mold and dust. The floor was littered with broken chairs, discarded renovation tools, and forgotten memories. In the corner where Monica and Ryan had stood, Ethan found a discarded piece of paper. It was a receipt from a pawn shop on the other side of town. He picked it up carefully. It detailed the sale of several pieces of expensive jewelry, items that Ethan recognized from Monica's home, family heirlooms she had once proudly shown off at a Christmas party. Gone, pawned, and for what? Theories spun wildly through Ethan's mind. Was Monica selling her possessions to fund their secret relationship? Was Ryan blackmailing her? Were they running some kind of scam together? Each idea was worse than the last. But one thing was clear. Whatever was happening between Monica and Ryan went far beyond a broken moral code. It was criminal. And now Ethan had something tangible, something he could use. He pocketed the receipt and left, slipping into the night like a phantom. Back home, he laid the receipt on his desk and stared at it for hours. His fingers traced the faded ink, memorizing every detail. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt sick. The Carters hadn't just betrayed him personally. They had corrupted everything they touched. The knowledge filled him with a terrible sense of purpose. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about justice. It was about exposing them for what they really were. He started formulating a plan. Careful, methodical. He would gather more evidence. He would make sure that when he moved, there would be no way for Monica or Ryan to talk their way out of it. No more whispers, no more doubts. Just the truth, raw, ugly, and undeniable. And this time, the whole town would see it. As Ethan lay in bed that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, he felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Control. For the first time since that awful night in the kitchen, he wasn't a victim. He was the one writing the ending, and he intended to make sure it was one Franklin would never forget. Ethan didn't act immediately. He knew better than that now. Rash decisions had consequences, something Monica and Ryan would learn soon enough. He spent the next week carefully, almost obsessively, gathering more evidence. Every spare moment after school, every sleepless night, he devoted to his mission. He followed Ryan discreetly, watching his patterns. It didn't take long to notice that Ryan had started visiting that same pawn shop listed on the receipt more often than should have been necessary. Ethan even managed to snap a few blurry photos from across the street. Ryan exchanging packages, shaking hands with shady-looking men. It wasn't just a secret relationship. It wasn't just betrayal. Ryan and Monica were involved in something illegal, something messy. And Ethan was going to drag it into the light. He started documenting everything, locations, times, faces. He created a secret file on an old USB drive, backing it up twice, one hidden in his bedroom, the other in the hollow frame of a picture on his desk. This wasn't a petty act of revenge anymore. It was a full-scale investigation. But the more Ethan uncovered, the more isolated he felt. He couldn't tell his mother. She wouldn't understand. He couldn't go to the police. Not yet. Not without enough evidence to crush any doubt. So he carried the burden alone, letting the weight of the secrets he uncovered harden him. One cold Saturday morning, everything shifted. Ethan was trailing Ryan again, staying a few cars behind as Ryan drove across town. Instead of the usual pawn shop, Ryan pulled into a run-down motel on the outskirts of Franklin. Ethan parked a block away and approached on foot, keeping low. He watched from a distance as Ryan entered room 112, carrying a backpack, the same one Ethan had seen stuffed with cash days before. After about 20 minutes, another car pulled up. A man Ethan didn't recognize got out, looking around nervously before knocking on the door. Ryan let him in. Ethan's stomach twisted. This wasn't just stolen jewelry anymore. It was a full-fledged operation. Drugs, maybe. Weapons. Something far worse than he had initially imagined. And Monica? Was she just complicit? Or orchestrating it all behind the scenes? The questions burned, but Ethan knew he had seen enough for today. He snapped a few more photos from a safe distance, then slipped away before anyone noticed. Back home, he uploaded the new evidence to his secret folder, labeling everything meticulously. He was almost ready. One more piece was missing: Monica's direct involvement. Ethan needed proof that she wasn't just covering for Ryan, she was participating. And then, as if the universe itself was delivering justice, the opportunity fell into his lap. The following Monday, Ethan spotted Monica at the town's pharmacy. She stood at the counter, arguing in hushed tones with the pharmacist, gesturing angrily at a bottle behind the glass. Ethan stayed hidden, watching carefully. He couldn't hear everything, but he caught enough words to understand. Prescriptions, false IDs, payments. He watched as Monica slipped an envelope, fat and heavy, across the counter. The pharmacist hesitated, but eventually took it, sliding a small bag in return. Ethan's hands trembled as he recorded the exchange with his phone. There it was, the nail in the coffin. Monica Carter, the woman he once admired, now caught in a criminal act that would shatter any illusion of her innocence. Ethan didn't feel victorious. He felt hollow, But he pushed the emotion aside. There would be time for grief later. Now was the time for action. That night, Ethan compiled everything into a final dossier: photos, timestamps, videos, written observations. He printed copies and sealed them in anonymous envelopes addressed to the local police department, the principal of Franklin High, and the editor of the town's only newspaper. He wasn't leaving anything to chance. If the police didn't act, the school would. If the school stayed silent, the press wouldn't. One way or another, the truth would explode. As he sealed the last envelope, Ethan sat back and stared at the pile in front of him. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. Tomorrow, everything would change. They had underestimated him. They had discarded him like trash, thinking he was weak, broken. But they had made a fatal mistake. They forgot that someone with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous person of all. Ethan smiled, a thin, joyless curve of his lips. Tomorrow, Monica and Ryan would feel the same loneliness, the same humiliation, the same betrayal they had forced onto him. Only this time, there would be no one to save them, only consequences, and Ethan Miller would be the one delivering them. The morning the envelopes were delivered, Franklin felt like a town waiting for a storm. The sky was heavy with thick grey clouds, and a sharp, restless wind rattled the bare branches lining the streets. Ethan watched from his window, the envelopes long gone from his hands, travelling through the veins of the town like silent messengers of destruction. He didn't go to school that day. He couldn't. The anticipation was a physical thing, vibrating under his skin, making it impossible to sit still. Instead, he paced the confines of his small bedroom, checking his phone obsessively, even though he knew no one would message him. Not yet. Around noon, it began. The first alert came from the Franklin Gazette's website. Breaking: local mother and son under investigation for alleged criminal activity. The headline hit him like a punch to the gut, even though he knew it was coming. He clicked the article with trembling fingers. The piece was brief, cautious, citing an anonymous tip-off about illicit dealings involving Monica Carter and her son, Ryan Carter. Police were reportedly investigating multiple incidents, including stolen goods, fraudulent transactions, and possible drug involvement. No arrests yet. Just the beginning. Ethan barely had time to absorb the news when his phone started buzzing. Texts poured in. Friends, classmates, even people he hadn't spoken to in years. Screenshots of the article. Messages filled with shock, disbelief, and in some cases thinly veiled satisfaction. He didn't respond to any of them. He didn't need to. The truth was moving now, gaining momentum, unstoppable. By mid-afternoon, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of the Carter house. Ethan watched from the corner of his street, hidden by the shadow of an old oak tree. Officers knocked on the front door. Ryan answered. Even from a distance, Ethan could see the fear in his former best friend's body language, the way he hesitated, the way he stepped aside reluctantly. Minutes later, Monica appeared in the doorway. Gone was the composed, polished woman Ethan once admired. She looked disheveled, her hair messy, her face pale. The officers spoke to them for several minutes before finally stepping inside. Ethan's heart pounded. This was it. Not a fantasy, not a daydream. Real consequences unfolding in real time. More neighbors gathered outside, pretending to walk their dogs or check their mail, their eyes glued to the Carter house. Whispers filled the air, thick as smoke. Ethan soaked it all in, the disbelief, the judgment, the downfall of the people who had shattered him. It wasn't happiness he felt, it wasn't triumph, it was something colder, something heavier. A quiet, grim satisfaction that justice, however messy, was being served. An hour later, Monica and Ryan were led out in handcuffs. The crowd gasped. Monica kept her head down, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Ryan looked around wildly, as if searching for someone to save him. There was no one. As they were placed into the back of separate cruisers, Ethan turned away, walking slowly back toward his house. He didn't need to see any more. He had seen enough. Inside his bedroom, Ethan collapsed onto his bed, staring up at the ceiling. He felt empty, not lighter, not freer, just done. The town's rumor mill kicked into overdrive in the days that followed. Stories changed and morphed as they passed from mouth to mouth. Some said Ryan had been running drugs through the pawn shop network. Others whispered that Monica had falsified prescriptions to launder money. Whatever the truth, it was ugly, and it was out there now. Monica and Ryan were suspended from their respective workplaces pending investigation. The Carter home was left abandoned, its windows dark, its front yard overgrown within weeks. And Ethan? He walked through Franklin streets like a ghost, unnoticed again, but now by choice. He didn't need the town's pity. He didn't want its attention. He had done what needed to be done. One cold afternoon, Detective Harris, the officer handling the Carter case, asked to speak with Ethan. They met at the local diner, in a booth near the back. Harris was a big man with tired eyes and a patient demeanor. "Look," he said, stirring his coffee, "I can't say much. Ongoing investigation and all that. But off the record, you did the right thing." Ethan nodded silently, his fingers tracing patterns on the scratched table. "You didn't just bring them down for yourself," Harris added. "You might have saved a lot of people from getting hurt." It should have felt good to hear that. It didn't. Ethan smiled politely, paid for his coffee, and left without saying much more. Justice didn't heal wounds. It didn't rebuild dreams. It didn't erase the betrayal burned into his memory. But it was something. It was enough. As spring crept into Franklin, painting the trees in soft greens and yellows, Ethan began rebuilding his life, one quiet step at a time. He focused on his classes, threw himself into college applications again. He got a part-time job at the local library, shelving books for minimum wage, but appreciating the simplicity of the task. He stopped visiting the places he and Ryan used to frequent. He stopped thinking of Monica every time he passed a kitchen. Some memories still stung when he least expected it, a song on the radio, a smell from a nearby restaurant, but the pain dulled with time. He was moving forward, not forgetting, not forgiving, just surviving. And for Ethan Miller, survival was its own kind of victory, because he knew now, no matter how much someone betrays you, no matter how badly you are broken, you can always choose to stand up. You can always choose to fight for yourself, and sometimes that's the greatest revenge of all. The fallout from the Carter scandal rippled through Franklin like a bomb had gone off, leaving shockwaves of disbelief in its wake. At first, no one knew how to react. The Carters had been fixtures in the community, respected, even admired. Monica was once celebrated for her volunteer work. Ryan was the local golden boy, destined for scholarships and success. Now, both names were whispered in disgust, their legacies reduced to cautionary tales. The police presence around the Carter home lingered for weeks, investigators combing through financial records, interviewing neighbors, building a case that grew uglier with each passing day. It turned out the operation had been going on for longer than anyone guessed. Ryan had been funneling stolen goods and prescription drugs through the pawn shops. Monica had used her position at the clinic to manipulate records and siphon medications under false names. The entire community felt betrayed. Mrs. Thompson, who lived 2 houses down, was quoted in the Franklin Gazette saying, "We trusted them. We welcomed them into our homes. How could they do this to us?" The betrayal wasn't just personal to Ethan anymore. It was communal. Franklin was a small town built on trust, and now that trust was shattered, parents warned their children about deception in ways they never had before. Teachers, once eager to share stories about Ryan's achievements, now avoided mentioning his name altogether. Church sermons shifted subtly, weaving in parables about hidden sins and false idols. The atmosphere was heavy, almost funereal. People passed the Carter house without looking at it directly, as if even glancing at it might stain them somehow. Meanwhile, Monica and Ryan awaited trial, each facing multiple felony charges. Their lawyer, a sharp-tongued outsider brought in from the city, tried to paint them as victims of circumstance, claiming financial hardship had driven them to desperation. But no one was buying it. The evidence was overwhelming. The town had seen enough. For Ethan, the reactions were complicated. Some people treated him like a hero. They whispered words of admiration, left notes of encouragement in his locker, even offered him free coffee at the diner. "You were so brave," they said. "You saved us all." But Ethan didn't feel like a hero. He didn't want to be. He had exposed the truth, yes, but he had also lost pieces of himself he would never recover. There were others who treated him differently, awkwardly, cautiously, as if being near him might somehow bring trouble their way. Some friendships quietly dissolved. Invitations to parties, group projects, casual hangouts, all fewer and farther between. Ethan understood. He was a reminder that ugly truths sometimes hid behind familiar faces. People didn't like being reminded of that. They preferred their illusions. It was easier. Through it all, Ethan remained composed. He kept his head down, finished his classes, prepared for a life beyond Franklin. He knew now that clinging too tightly to people, to places, only made the fall harder when everything inevitably collapsed. The local media, hungry for scandal, stretched the story as far as they could. They painted Monica as the cold-hearted mastermind, Ryan as the wayward son who followed blindly. Photos of their arrests were splashed across newspapers, shared relentlessly on social media. Ethan's name was kept out of the reports at his request. He didn't want fame. He didn't want his face tied to their disgrace. He just wanted freedom. When sentencing finally came, it was swift and merciless. Monica Carter was given 15 years in prison for fraud, drug trafficking, and conspiracy. Ryan Carter, tried as an adult, received 10 years. The courtroom had been packed that day, the weight of the town's anger and betrayal pressing down on everyone inside. Ethan attended, sitting quietly in the back. He watched as Monica stood before the judge, her shoulders slumped, her once proud posture broken. Ryan barely looked up. Neither of them glanced in Ethan's direction. He didn't expect them to. They were too busy crumbling under the weight of their own choices. The judge's words echoed through the silent courtroom. Betrayal is a poison that does not only destroy the guilty, it infects everyone around them. When the verdict was read, there was no applause, no cheers, just a heavy, aching silence. Afterward, Ethan stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun, blinking against the light. It should have felt like the end of something. It didn't. It felt like a beginning. A messy, painful, necessary beginning. The town of Franklin slowly began to heal. Businesses reopened. Kids played outside again. Neighbors shared cautious smiles once more. But something fundamental had changed. Trust, once given freely, now had to be earned. Ethan found solace in that. He no longer needed to be everyone's friend. He didn't need to belong to any family but his own. He had himself. And for the first time, that was enough. He spent the summer working odd jobs, saving money, preparing for the move to college. He found a small school in another state, far enough to leave Franklin behind, close enough to visit his mother when needed. On his last night in town, he walked past the Carter house one final time. The windows were boarded up now. The garden was overgrown with weeds. It looked as abandoned and broken as Ethan had once felt. He paused at the end of the driveway, staring at the hollow shell of what used to be his second home. There was no anger anymore, no sadness, just acceptance. Some things, Ethan thought, are meant to fall apart. Without another glance, he turned and walked away. The night air cool against his skin, each step carrying him closer to the life he had fought so hard to reclaim. A life that, at last, belonged to him, and him alone. Looking back, Ethan realized that betrayal was not the most devastating part of what happened. It was the loss of innocence, the brutal ripping away of the belief that loyalty, love, and trust were enough to keep people honorable. He had spent so much of his young life building dreams around others, measuring his worth by their acceptance, tethering his happiness to their approval. It had taken the collapse of everything he believed in to teach him a truth he would carry for the rest of his life. The only loyalty you can ever truly count on is the one you give to yourself. Trust is precious, but it should never be blind. Love is powerful, but it should never cost you your sense of self. Ethan learned that even the people you idolize are human, flawed, weak, and sometimes dangerously selfish. And putting your entire heart into someone else's hands, no matter how noble it feels, can leave you shattered beyond recognition when they drop it. He didn't blame himself anymore. For a long time, he had thought that if he had just been better, more perfect, more lovable, maybe Monica and Ryan wouldn't have crossed that line. Maybe they would have protected the fragile family he thought they all shared. But he understood now. Their choices had nothing to do with him. Their betrayal spoke only of their own brokenness, their own greed and cowardice. He had been collateral damage in a war he never knew was being fought, and surviving it, clawing his way back to solid ground, had become his quiet rebellion. Ethan realized that healing wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about pretending the pain had never existed. It was about learning to carry the scar without letting it define him. It was about learning to trust again, not blindly, but wisely. Not because he needed others to complete him, but because he had built a self strong enough to withstand even the deepest wounds. He also understood something else, something colder, but just as vital. Not everyone deserves forgiveness. Some betrayals are too profound, too deliberate to be erased with apologies, and that's okay. Forgiveness is a gift, not an obligation. Ethan chose peace over bitterness, not by welcoming the Carters back into his heart, but by removing their power to hurt him anymore. They were no longer monsters under his bed. They were just broken people whose choices had cost them everything. He had survived them, he had rebuilt, and now his future was his own, free from illusions, free from chains, free from the ghosts that once haunted every corner of his life. And that, Ethan knew, was a victory greater than any revenge could ever deliver. In the months that followed the Carter scandal, Franklin slowly stitched itself back together. The Carter house remained abandoned, a silent monument to a story no one wanted to talk about openly anymore. The town council debated what to do with the property, tear it down, repurpose it. But no decision was ever finalized. It simply stood there, empty and rotting, like a wound that had scarred over but never fully healed. Monica Carter served her sentence in a medium-security prison 2 states away. Reports filtered back occasionally. She kept to herself, rarely spoke, refused visitors. Some said she spent her days in the prison library, reading silently, as if trying to disappear into the pages of someone else's life. Ryan Carter didn't fare as well. After a few violent altercations behind bars, he was transferred to a stricter facility. The once promising young man became another cautionary tale, whispered about in classrooms and living rooms as a warning of how quickly everything could fall apart. Neither of them ever reached out to Ethan. No letters, no calls, but that suited him just fine. Ethan moved on. He started his freshman year at a small liberal arts college nestled in the mountains of Vermont. It was a world away from Franklin in every sense. New faces, new streets, new possibilities. At first, he struggled to trust. He kept his distance, wary of letting anyone too close. But over time, he found a rhythm. He joined a photography club, spent weekends hiking with a few classmates, buried himself in his coursework. For the first time in a long time, his life felt like it belonged to him. There were nights, though, quiet, solitary nights, when the past crept back in. Sometimes it was a dream where he stood outside the Carter house, unable to move. Sometimes it was a sudden memory triggered by a smell or a song. But they didn't control him anymore. They were just shadows, reminders of what he had survived. He didn't tell his new friends about Franklin. He didn't share the full story of Monica and Ryan. He wasn't running from his past. He was simply choosing not to let it define his every conversation, his every relationship. Franklin remained a part of him, a chapter written in ink he couldn't erase, but it wasn't the whole book. Meanwhile, back in Franklin, the town continued to rebuild its trust, slowly, cautiously. People learned to look a little closer, to ask a few more questions. But they also learned to forgive, not blindly, but wisely. The Carter scandal became a story parents told their children. Be careful who you trust. Remember that people aren't always who they seem. It was a hard lesson, but an important one. And somewhere miles away, Ethan Miller lived that lesson every day. Not with bitterness, not with fear, but with a quiet strength, a steady heartbeat that whispered, "You survived the worst. You can survive anything." What about you? After hearing everything Ethan endured, the betrayal, the loss, the painful rebuilding, what do you think justice really looks like? Do you believe Ethan made the right choice by exposing the truth, even though it meant tearing apart a family and facing unimaginable loneliness? Or do you think some secrets should have stayed buried for the sake of peace? Tell us what you would have done if you were in Ethan's place. Would you have stayed silent? Would you have fought back? Would you have risked everything for the chance to finally be free? We want to hear your theories, your thoughts, and your feelings. Was justice served, or was something even deeper lost along the way? Leave a comment below and tell us, was Ethan a hero or just another casualty of betrayal? And if this story gripped your heart the way it did ours, don't forget to like the video, share it with friends who love true crime mysteries, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life cases that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust, loyalty, and human nature. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that chills you to the bone and reminds you that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones hiding right beside us. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay curious and stay cautious.